I'm Jim Check. You're watching Kelowna Now.
And I'm Renee Merrifield.
And we're here with Beyond the Ballot. And holy cow, do we have a lot going on. Like,
a half hour's not long enough, Jim.
I just... Turmoil with Trudeau. I think that's a fitting title that we've got going on.
Absolutely.
And it is, I think, way past turmoil. You've got the letter there from Chrystia Freeland. And it says some stuff that's pretty damning of their...
Well, when Sean Fraser, who is the housing minister, resigned over the weekend, I kind of was like, that's an odd time. Like, that's kind of a bizarre move to make and a bizarre time to make it. And it didn't make a whole lot of sense. And then I started seeing some text messages coming through talking about how there were more to come. And I thought, who would be more to come? Well, when this letter dropped on Monday morning, I was shocked, to say the least. This is not just a resignation letter. This letter from Chrystia Freeland basically was a condemnation of not just Trudeau's politics, but also his policies and almost his person. You know, and I was saying to you just before we started that this is the equivalent of the vice president of the United States turning on the president publicly. And in Canada, we're so polite that maybe this letter wouldn't be as scathing if it was in the UK or in the US. But man, oh man, this is as bad as Canadians will get.
I've seen.
This is like the scathing of scathing. But it's like, you told me you no longer wanted me to serve. For the past number of weeks, you and I found ourselves at odds, and we talked about that, how there has, trouble in the House. But then it was, she's saying we need to keep our fiscal powder dry today for reserves that may need for a coming tariff war. But here's where it gets really bad. Costly political gimmicks. She's basically saying Pierre's right. It's a gimmick. It's a tax trick. We're right. Yeah. And she does also say that, Canadians will recognize and respect a different approach. They know when we're working for them, and they equally know when we are focused on ourselves. And I think, you and I have been sitting here going, this government is no longer working for Canadians. This government has thrown, the economic responsibility out the window, and we are looking at a free fall of a government economically. So, this is bad, and this was a real condemnation of Trudeau and where he's heading right now with policy.
And it also shows that she's trying to distance herself from that gimmick by saying, no, it really wasn't really my idea. I pushed back against it. You kind of forced my hand. And then, the rumors are out there that he told her that he was going to give her a different job on Monday, but he wanted her to read the budget. Yeah. I'm just like, well, if I were smarter, I would have told her on Monday or Tuesday.
Way after she actually went through the economic economic update.
Shows the intelligence, though, because you ask her, you basically fired her on Zoom yet, and then you're saying, well, you read the budget, and then we can work things up. Maybe it's just arrogance. I think maybe that's
it's not indicative of his intelligence. It's indicative of his arrogance. To think that you could fire someone, demote someone, and then tell them that they still need to take out the trash with this
and take the fall for it.
Yeah, and take the fall for it, and it's not even their idea. I think is a huge amount of hubris that I think.
Let her read it and then get all the negative reaction and say, I've done away with her.
Yeah, exactly. I've gotten rid of her. Look we've got a new day, a new way. Here comes Mark Carney.
And here's the other thing that makes it almost really tough to choke down. Right after he does this speech about being a feminist first and calling out American voters that, how he they've set back women's progress. And then he goes and she's just not the finance minister. She's also the deputy PM. She's second in charge. And
she's the vice president.
and I would say she's been treated very disrespectfully. I'm not saying she's done a great job either, but I mean, that's disrespectful in that ask, I think.
Absolutely. You've got three, whether it's Jody Wilson-Raybould, MP Caesar, or now with Chrystia Freeland. This is a trend. Trudeau treats women horribly. Honestly, I think that women tend more, gender, I'm trying not to be too gender biased, but women tend more to be team players. They tend more to be less self-interested. And I think that what we've seen here is Trudeau utilizing that to his advantage. But on the other hand, actually, women will also stand up when ethics or morality has been crossed. And we saw that with Jody Wilson-Raybould. We saw that with Jane Philpott. We saw that with MP Caesar. We are now seeing that with Chrystia Freeland. And I think that for Trudeau to call himself a feminist would be so disingenuous and hypocritical at this point.
So and that comes back to what we said before. Like, watch the walk as opposed to the talk, right? Because he talks the talk always, right? He gets up there and talks the talk, but he rarely ever walks the walk. And even Jody Wilson-Raybould had a tweet out there.
Oh yeah, she was out right away. She was out right away saying, "This is not how you treat women, and this is not how you treat your deputy prime minister, and you don't have a spat and then fire her. That's not the way to do it."
So even after that letter that comes out basically saying the GST thing is a political gimmick, and the Senate has said the same thing, it's going to amount to about $5 for most people, and there's a lot of negativity out on social media on it. The Liberal Party put out this tweet today. Take a look at this. Like, we're going to put this up here. You can put it up there, Rommel. Have they lost their minds? Because they're still promoting it. The holiday season, all Canadians are getting a tax break on everyday goods, all part of the plan to make life more affordable for Canadians. Is this account run by like a group of 12-year-olds or
it's
are
probably
they
a group of
20-year-olds?
No, it's probably a group of 20-year-olds. They're being told what to do. The party leader is still the leader until they're not. Yeah. So Trudeau is going to be calling the shots, and if he wants this to go out, and you see this often with leaders who will say something enough times to make it true. And I don't think Canadians are buying it, and there is no trust. I mean, Freeland says that in her letter, that they're no longer operating in good faith. I think the Canadians feel that. Last night I was at a meeting, and people were talking about what's going on right now with government, and they said we're visionless and we're rudderless. It's like we're a ship in the middle of an ocean being tossed by waves, and that's how Canadians are feeling right now. There's no path forward here for us, and we feel like we are in free fall as we're watching our government.
And I'm going to say something that's a bit controversial for my own. I'm a CPA, and I spoke with another CPA yesterday. And I said, where's our society been in all these economic things? Where's our society been in saying these economic policies don't make sense? I think there should be a bigger voice from the accounting world. And it's because if you look at the economic status of Canada, it's in free fall all over the place.
And I think the economists also need to be louder. We need bigger voices that say this is not the path forward. This is not going to get us to where we need to go, and this is not the right way. I think that economists have kind of I guess taken what's being told by the governments and saying, yeah, okay, this isn't going to happen, without being that strong voice. And you and I talked about the business community needing to be a stronger voice. There's a lot of different entities that really have to step up and say this isn't working, and if it's not working, rather than going bankrupt like the Small Business Association of BC, they need to be a louder voice saying we're dying a death of 1,000 cuts, our members are failing, we need help, and this not help like a handout, we need help as in we need to actually see our small businesses thriving, we need to see our economy thriving, and that is not what is happening, and that is not what the fiscal policy is doing right now.
Yeah, so rising unemployment, falling dollar, housing crisis. When we go crisis, lots of them. Healthcare crisis. Today we found out like the number of physicians in Canada has gone down. That'll be in the news thing later. But here's Justin Trudeau last night. We're going to play this clip here. You can play that full screen there, Rommel, too. There you go. That's good, Ronald. I mean, it would have been. I know everybody out there heard it, but we were having a tough time. But I have heard it.
It's all good. I heard it last night. I watched it with being completely incredulous.
Yeah, is he delusional? Like, this is not a spat. This is your government. 60 MPs have now signed a letter saying they need you to go. Will it be the Liberals that actually vote no confidence before the NDP?
I considered that. The NDP are spineless. Jagmeet Singh, yesterday in media interviews basically would not commit to taking down government, although he said Trudeau had to go. Does that mean that if Trudeau goes over the holidays, then, Jagmeet will continue to prop up government? It's ridiculous. But honestly, I think that at this point, we could see a non-confidence vote coming from inside the Liberal Party, as fast as we could from the NDP.
So it seems pretty obvious at this point that Jagmeet is interested in his own self-interest as well, because like he's saying that he must resign, he must do this, and he's held the keys forever, right? So a lot of this is people are starting to say this is on you, right?
And I think that Canadians are looking for strength. They're looking for solutions. And I mean, that showed in the last poll. The last poll results, and I'll pull this up here really quickly. The last Abacus poll showed that the Conservatives, if a vote was held today, would get 252 seats. That's up 133. The Bloc Québécois would come in second as our loyal opposition with 60 seats. The NDP with 20, and the Liberals with 10. Currently, that is a horrible result, I think that the NDP are falling as well, and really what they're seeing is the Conservatives and the Bloc Québécois have offered the strongest voice for Canadians and the strongest change vote.
I've listened to the Bloc a few times. It seems like he's definitely has more interest in Canada, like a better interest in Canada than the NDP and the Liberals.
Yeah,
right
the scary part about the Bloc Québécois is that the fundamental, push and the fundamental vision of the Bloc Québécois is to support Quebec.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's surprising
it's like a party of Alberta coming in second. But I think what Canadians are saying is that they want change. And I don't know if you watched Pierre in the House deliver his address to the economic update. But honestly, they had to use political workaround, and thank goodness the speaker allowed him to go. But they used a political workaround to literally get him to have the ability to speak, because the economic update was delivered in such a way that it allowed no one else to speak. That's unprecedented. Like, I can't even describe to you how odd that would have felt to everyone sitting there. So to deliver it with absolutely zero address, to table it as a motion and nothing more, is a bizarre way to put your economic update. And then, when Pierre delivered his address, he said, people don't really necessarily want me. They just don't want you, and they want change so badly. And so I thought that was a brilliant. If you have not watched that, watch that. It's a 5-minute clip, so we won't play it here today. But go and watch it. For me, it was like, wow, this is something that will resonate broadly across Canada, because this is from a leader that's saying, I don't have all the answers, but at least I have some.
I did post it on my LinkedIn as a must-watch for sure. And then it's even getting some accolades from people like Bill Ackman, a very well-respected businessman in the United States, saying that's the real Prime Minister, and that's what Canada needs to lead its nation. So there is a lot of... I would also go on to say, like, Danielle Smith is doing the job of the Prime Minister right now too, trying to negotiate for Canada, and there's a few other premiers doing it. But
I was going to say Doug Ford as well was out, over the course of the last week. He's not waiting for a federal answer. He is going to go, and he's threatening to cut off energy from the U.S. There are two different approaches. Danielle Smith is taking the more diplomatic, let's negotiate, and you know what, let's shore up my border. Absolutely. Doug Ford is taking a more aggressive approach. You need our energy. We're not going to give it to you. Both will have pros and cons to them. But what I guess the surprising thing for me is that you now have premiers behaving in a federal manner. They are actually doing the work of a federal prime minister. And that to me is, I don't want to see all these kind of disparate, different provinces taking different approaches, because I think that could be very, very divisive amongst Canadians.
But I think Danielle Smith has even taken it a step further. She's went down there and she's had meetings with a bunch of U.S. officials.
Wait, not at Mar-a-Lago, and she didn't get ridiculed.
No, and but she is doing some of the heavy lifting for Canada right now.
Agreed.
and it shows leadership for sure, and that's what I think Canada really needs right now, is some leadership.
At this same dinner party, and this was not said by a political conservative by any stretch, this person said, the last time I felt proud of Canada was under Stephen Harper. Because at least wherever I went in the world, and he's a business person that travels the world, but he said, at least wherever I went in the world, people really respected Harper, and they respected Canada for our resource sector and our trade and what we could give to people. And you and I have had that conversation. Like, basically our political leaders, whether it's the NDP and David Eby and Horgan, or whether it's Trudeau, they've taken our poker chips off the table. They basically said, we don't have anything that we can actually barter with or trade with. And that's put us into a really negative position, and one where our Canadian dollar is in free fall, and our prosperity of Canadians is also down 7 out of 8 quarters in a row.
Yeah, our resource sector is being suppressed, and we're taxing energy. And energy is a basic human need, like fire. When fire was found, like when fire was created, that's what made humanity different, right? So fire and different forms of fire, whether that's oil and gas or LNG or whatever, energy is in everything we do, and it's being taxed like it's a luxury, and it's a basic necessity. And they talk about taxing things. You should never tax a basic necessity for human life, and energy is a basic necessity, but we tax it like a luxury, all the while our PM and his crew travel the world living lavishly on tax dollars, and they're living the life of luxury on tax dollars, and yet they're still taxing basic human needs.
Yeah. And I mean, we've talked about the carbon tax. We talked about the carbon tax going up in April. If we do not have an election before that, we're going to see that go up, and Canadians cannot afford that. But we're also seeing not just that, but we've seen an attack from policy on our natural resource sector. The BC NDP delivered their economic update. And I was shocked to see that it didn't get more press, because honestly, it is horrific. It's $9.4 billion in deficit, which is the most ever in recorded history. I don't care if you account for inflation. There's no way to show it in any other light other than horrific. But having said that, this is a direct result of the natural resource policy of this government. And it was cited in the update, and Minister Bailey said, as this is because our natural resource sector in revenues are down. Well, why?
Exactly. Why?
You've tanked the forestry industry. You come up against the LNG and basically told everyone else, other than the one project that's gotten underway, to go home. And and our mining is literally leaving our province. I attended a mining event in the spring, and they just said investment dollars are gone. They're non-existent right now. So you literally have attacked every single natural resource sector, and then you're shocked when they start losing money and are not able to prop up the government spending. Absolutely ridiculous. This is a direct result of policy, and they should be taking responsibility. And instead, Brenda was like a deer in headlights. It was like, we don't know why this is happening. It's so shocking that our revenues are down. It is no mystery to anyone who has been, watching policy and watching policy affect those that are actually on the ground and in those resource sectors.
Just a little homework for people. If you go take a look, because the stock market is kind of like our monitor of our economy. And if you go look at the TSX, most of the companies on there are resource based, and that's our high flyers, our resource. We don't have a lot of tech sector stuff. It's our resource sector that's there. And if they are leaving, we've seen it with tech when they left $1 billion project. They already spent $1 billion and left in Fort McMurray and stuff like that. So if we chase them away, we've got that giant sucking sound where they're going to leave, because some of the best miners in the world, and I've interviewed quite a few of them, are from Canada. Some of the best technology is from Canada. And guess where they're mining? Not in Canada.
No.
You know, they're mining all over the world except Canada. And Canada is rich in resources. It's just hard to get a project off the ground.
And if we think that it doesn't have an affect, I mean, we've got offices in Vancouver, we've got offices in Kelowna here of these mining companies that typically would have really great paying jobs. They are mining everywhere, high paying, right? They are mining everywhere else except in BC. You know, they're in Venezuela, they're in Mexico, they are in, you know, in the UAE, and we are getting our yeah.
And then another thing too,
our lunch handed to us.
Walk through a hospital and look at some of the big equipment in that hospital, and you're going to see underneath it donated by Kinross, donated by, you know, a lot of these mining companies. I won't go through all the names, but because they give back to communities, right? Do. And we have definitely become ashamed. I used to be a mine site controller as well. We've become ashamed of our resource sector for some strange reason. But they are good paying jobs, and they're the ones that build houses and buy pickup trucks and build families.
And they're also the most environmentally friendly in all of the world. We sell LNG, we can develop our mines, and we can do our forestry with less emissions than anywhere else in the world. So why we are not proud of this, why we are not bragging about this, why we are not selling it to the world is beyond me. 44% less emissions from our LNG than any other LNG anywhere else produced in the world. That should be like a flag and a banner that we fly, and instead we're almost embarrassed about our natural resource sector. And you talked about the give back of the mining industry. It's not just the mining industry. You ask any town where there's a mill, where there is a forestry sector, where there is an LNG, that those towns and those villages, absolutely, and without them, they are in decline.
Simply put, Dawson Creek doesn't just show up because people just say, hey, this is a great place for a town. Dawson Creek showed up because of oil and gas. Dawson Creek showed up because of lumber. Fort St. John showed up.
Most do not choose to live there without a great paying job. Yeah,
they're there because of the resource sector, right? And that's what a lot of people forget, that all these towns outside of the Lower Mainland are really resource-based, including Kelowna was a forestry town.
Yeah, and here's a scary statistic for you. 80% of our GDP is produced outside the Lower Mainland.
There you go.
It's, and so those that are inside the Lower Mainland have this myopic view of, and, we are the center of BC, but without all of the resource sector, firing on all cylinders in the, outside of the Lower Mainland, we will literally implode. And we are seeing that happen with our deficit and with our budget right now.
I interviewed Bruce Rose from AP Planners, and he said that a lot of people, like he lives in the Lower Mainland, and he said a lot of people there think all the trees are like the ones in Stanley Park. Don't want to cut those down because those are, but that's not the reality of the forest sector, right? Like there's a different type of trees out here. And it'll help with wildfires if we harvest. We have a good harvesting plan and a regrowth plan. But the forestry sector has definitely been treated so poorly.
And you actually said something there that was really, really critical. And I'm going to piggyback on that. And that was plan. What the forestry sector is lacking is a master plan, a redo of how the forestry sector behaves. And I think that with a complete upending of it, we could modernize our forestry practices in such a way that we could be protected from fire. We could actually have a thriving environment. We could be, having a biofuels sector that produces energy, not just lumber. And instead, we have been dying a death of 1,000 cuts from policy decisions that have been made on the fly, in isolation, that have created chaos and confusion. And when chaos and confusion ensues, dollars will leave. And we have homegrown companies like Tolco spending billions of dollars in the States and not spending a dime. In fact, scaling back their operations here in Canada.
Canfor, one of British Columbia's
another one
grown company. It is a BC-born company that basically cut their plans for building a plant in Houston, closed their the Bear Lake mill, cut production in there, and said that BC is just not an environment we can operate in. And that's a poor testament for one of the Canada's largest forestry companies and BC born to say that it can't operate in BC.
Agreed.
Kevin Falcon and John Rustad had a plan to kind of fix forestry. They both said that they wanted to address it. I see nothing from David Eby so far on forestry, even though when I interviewed him, he recognized that forestry was in a rough shape as well. And, Rustad and Falcon said it was in shambles. And it is in the Okanagan, hurts us because of wildfires so much, right?
Again, Jim, I'm going to go back to something you said. Look at what they are doing, not at what they are saying. So Eby can say as much as he wants. Yes, we have recognized it. Forestry needs a new way forward. We need a new plan. This is how we're going. Absolutely. He can say that till he's blue in the face. The reality is he hasn't done anything to address that, nor does he want to. He is going to appease some of his most activist, environmentalists inside of his caucus to try and destroy the natural resource sector. They don't believe a single tree should be taken. They don't believe ever that we should have any more fossil fuels ever taken. So honestly, I do not think that Eby is going to solve this in any way, shape, or form. The scary part for me is that I have not seen the BC Conservatives really take their stage as an opposition. And, when this budget announcement was made, thank God they have Peter Millibar, who stood up and said, hey, this is bad and here's why. And he's brilliant. I have nothing but high respect for Peter. But honestly, they need 50 Peters right now. And I don't even see 3.
When I did those interviews, and I interviewed quite a few people in forestry, we did so many stories on forestry and so many interviews. One of them is what you just touched on, is that conservation is the big thing, and Stephen Jabot is too close to the BC NDP and is basically kind of controlling our forestry and not allowing people to cut trees. Like the mills are saying they can't get
fiber.
Cut blocks, they can't get fiber, can't get access. And yet, when I talk to the forest minister, they're saying that's not true, and I'm just like, obviously they're not going to the same meetings. They say they're meeting, but they're coming out with different information, right? So it's weird.
Absolutely. And the incredible responsibility that this NDP government has put upon all of the resource sector companies to negotiate with First Nations. And in BC, we have a third of all First Nations. So it's a very complex, landscape. It's very difficult for these resource companies, and they literally have to go one by one with, nations that don't have a lot of capacity. They don't have a lot of, they don't have a sitting lawyer that can negotiate these deals with them. So you're dealing with very complex agreements, and really with whether it's the forestry industry, the LNG, or the oil and gas sector in general, or the mining sector. I mean, the mining sector is the largest employer of Indigenous population and in all of our industries. And yet to put the onus onto all of them to try and negotiate is very difficult. And the landscape has been changing, and the landscape has gotten more difficult as this government has kind of pulled its hands off and said, well, best of luck to you.
You served in government, $9.4 billion budget. One of the things that the province doesn't have that the feds have, they can't print money.
No.
Right? So did you guys ever have a budget deficit of $9.4 billion?
Never. This is completely unprecedented. And what I want, one of the points of this entire show is to actually say, like, how does it affect you? The thing I want people to realize is that this amount of debt has exceeded what a province can make up in a short amount of time. We are not Alberta. Alberta posts a $10 billion debt. They can make it up in a couple of years if oil prices skyrocket. We do not have that luxury. We're talking about generational debt right now. We're talking about my grandkids carrying this debt. And, I would be shocked if our debt doesn't become our largest spend in very short order. Second,
that debt, right?
Second behind health. And that is $5, $6, $7 billion of interest charges that we have to spend every single year. And as we are demoted in our rating, we will actually see those interest costs rise because we won't.
Gets higher.
Exactly. Our risk gets higher, and we are not eligible for that low cost money. So we've been put on notice by Moody's. We've been put on notice by the other agencies that this is not sustainable. And what I see from this NDP government is like shock and awe rather than this is how we're going to deal with getting back on track.
With this $9.4 billion deficit, right after he basically gave everybody a position, everybody a raise too. Again, it seems out of touch.
You raise an excellent point. Those orders in council that came through, which basically shored up his office, David Eby's office. He put everyone in his office at the highest pay scale that can be had by a government bureaucrat. Absolutely ridiculous. Shows zero restraint. Just after giving his entire caucus a raise, I heard him on the Mike Smith show, and Mike Smith was holding his feet to the fire, saying, like, when has this ever been done before? And he referenced actually when the BC Liberals put the law in place as to how raises would be done for MLAs, that it couldn't exceed the CPI and that it never needed to be negotiated, that would just rise with CPI. And he gave that as an example. Well, that was the last time that everyone got a raise. This is so different than that. This is not giving everyone a raise. This is giving just the NDP a raise, and giving the NDP a raise in the middle of economic strife when the rest of BC and all of the other British Columbians are struggling to make ends meet. It's completely tone deaf, and again shows a level of arrogance and a level of fiscal irresponsibility that I say is truly unprecedented.
You run a company. It's not like you're running deficits in your company and just like everybody gets a raise, right?
No.
Because you have to come up with that money.
This is different. This is like running a company and saying only the senior team gets a raise.
Exactly. Yeah, they figured a workaround, just like, well, we don't have to give it to them, but we got this really cool way to do it.
Absolutely. Right? Rather than working for the better of everyone there. And seeing everyone prosper, it's actually the exact opposite. We're gonna take use credit cards to pay back credit cards, and in doing so, give everyone.
So this Doge thing in the States is really catching on. A lot of countries are asking for it now. And do you think we're ever going to see something like that in BC where we have to have some like accountability? I think we need, if we're going to hire anybody, we should hire accountants that say, and you have to make a case for them to get a raise, because like we shouldn't be allowing politicians to write checks to themselves.
No, I mean, the last time that we really saw that was in 2001 when Premier Campbell said, we're going to have a ministry, and it was a Ministry of State that was going to be basically a red tape reduction. Every single cabinet minister had to justify, if they were bringing in a new regulation or a new law, why they were doing that. And they had to take one off the table or two off the table. For every one that was added, two were taken away. They actually reduced the number of regulations by 42%, which was an absolute awesome success. But what we saw as a result of that was that businesses thrived. We saw businesses return. And I heard the vice president of Shell actually say that, we came to BC because of the regulatory environment, and we will leave BC because of it. And when you hear that, I mean, it kind of gives you shivers, but that is what businesses do. They go because it's a global economy and they can go anywhere. And we are seeing a mass exodus of businesses out of Canada, out of BC, because it's simply not a good environment to do business anymore.
We were going to play a clip, but I know I heard from somebody, just wait a second, Ronald, that the sound didn't work on the Justin Trudeau clip. So there was no sound there. So unless we can get sound, we're going to probably just have you talk about it. Can you get sound to that, Rommel? Because if you can't get sound, then
so
we'll just talk about it, Rommel. Don't bother.
Yeah, this is in direct, and I can post it on my Instagram and on my other channels as well, my X channel. But what it was. I heard Brenda Bailey, the Minister of Finance, this week talking to Phil Johnson on AM 1150 about how proud she was that she was restoring the animation tax credit and how it was so necessary for Kelowna businesses and how our Kelowna animation sector really depended on it, and that's why she was bringing it back. Well, I debated that aspect of our budget last year, and basically said almost those exact words to the minister. And I have to give huge props here to Ashley Ramsey, who was in my ear on my cell phone, literally like watching the debate live and texting back, statistics that I could be using. John Summerland, absolutely brilliant in trying to get the voice out and collect the animation studios. But I heard from every single animation studio, from every single leader in this sector, even from Okanagan College, from the university, sounding the alarm bell and saying this is going to have catastrophic effects on us. Only to see now, and I want to give credit where credit is due, and that's why I'm saying all of these names, because Brenda Bailey is now bringing that animation tax credit back because they've realized how devastating it is to those studios. So huge props to everyone who had a role in really sounding the alarm bell and bringing that to attention. Shame on government for not doing it then. They could have, literally by removing a date, made everything stay exactly the same as it was, and instead carried on because, in arrogant fashion, they wanted to, not be shown to have made a mistake.
So we're going to put a link in this video in the story, because we'll do a story on this too. So we'll put a link to that video in there. Yeah. And then we're running out of time because at 10 o'clock we have an economist out of a think tank from Quebec calling in, and they're going to talk about the budget, the federal budget.
Very exciting.
And I think one of the things we'll maybe end on this is that BC government is kind of like being able to allowed to hide in the shade right now, because I think the federal politics have really, you said that before we went on, have yes. kind of taken a lot of the light.
Absolutely. But pay attention. Pay attention to what is happening, because it is very, very scary. And we do not have a premier who is standing up against Trump. We do not have a premier who is in a solid fiscal state. We do not have a premier that went back to the Legislative Assembly this fall to be held accountable for anything. So we're in a really scary place right now, and we as British Columbians need to hold this government accountable.
And we do have Gavin due in later this afternoon as well, and he's going to talk about the failure of the small business.
Small Business BC.
Yeah, Small Business BC, which is horrific as well.
100%.
So lots going on. Again, great show, Renee. Lots of knowledge always. Really appreciate you supporting KelownaNow and coming on and doing this every week. And I think are we doing another one before the end of the year?
Absolutely.
There you go. So
one more.
Merry Christmas to everybody, and thank you for watching this and everything else that we do on KelownaNow. We appreciate it.